We are all here because I don't know about you, but I'm guessing you feel the same way. I've never felt more serious about an election in my entire life. And I'm guessing that you're all here because you do too. And listen, I mean, not to be dramatic, but I think October 7th has put all of us in such a horrendous headspace of recognizing that we're just not as safe as we thought we were. And while we may have seen horrible things happen in Israel over the years and in different parts around the world, having it be here has changed the game, at least for me. And specifically, you know, I said this in one of my Instagram videos. I believe that if there were social media in 1938, this is kind of what it would feel like. And it's not just about how we as Jews feel. And I just want to also give a shout out to the allies in this audience, because there are many people here who are not Jewish, but care deeply about what is happening here and in Israel. So we're all here for this existential moment. And listen, this is factual, or is taking a massive toll. Election anxiety, 61% say presidential elections' impact on mental health is negative. And it doesn't matter if you're Gen Z or Gen X or a baby boomer, it doesn't matter if you're male, female, it's all pretty consistent. And then you throw October 7th into that mix, and the cocktail is quite a hangover the next day. But you're not alone, I'm not alone, and we're all here together. So everyone, I can't see you because Zoom doesn't allow me to see you right now. I see my presentation, so I hope I'm looking directly at you, but we are going to get into it. So first of all, hi, I'm Aliza Licht. A lot of people think my name's Aliza. It is not, it's Aliza. And a little bit about me. I am a marketer. I am the founder of Leave Your Mark, where I focus on brand strategy for businesses in the fashion industry, mostly, and individuals on personal branding. I'm a two-time author. I wrote Leave Your Mark in 2015, and I wrote On Brand last year, a book about personal branding. I have a podcast called Leave Your Mark. I am a real-life gossip girl. In my former life, in PR at Donna Karan, I was an anonymous social media personality for 2 years called DKNY PR Girl, one of the first examples of one. So I lived through that, and I am, as I think a lot of you know, a full-time red lipstick wearer. Two things that I never thought would happen. Being a Jewish activist was not on brand for me. And I will say, if you read my book On Brand, you will see in there, I tell one little lie, which is, I don't get political on social media. No, totally off brand for me. I'm a proud Jew, but I do not talk about it online. That was who I am. And then October 7th happened. What happened was, I was like, wait, I'm the granddaughter of 4 Holocaust survivors, and I cannot be scared to lose clients or followers or friends by speaking out. So what was never about me as being a Jewish activist became really a full-time role for 6 months, and now it's an and, not an or. Tonight, I want you to know that I am independent. I am an independent woman, but besides that, I'm not affiliated with any single campaign. I am not being paid to do this. I am doing this because after October 7th, I did, like many of you, a deep dive into Middle East history, like I've never done before, into politics, into Iran, into all of these things. I mean, I grew up going to a Jewish day school, so this was very much a part of my history, but I hadn't thought about it in years. And because I'm so immersed, my view changed. I woke up. So I want you to know, like I promised you, this is a very balanced, factual presentation where I will take you through the journey of sort of where we were and where we are. And I'm all just asking for everyone to just pay attention because it's important. So first of all, I want you all to know that you all did submit 1,300 questions, which is amazing. And I made this presentation from your questions. I will tell you, there was a lot of overlap. And like I said, I'm bringing you the facts. This is compiled based on the questions you submitted. It's about policy. It's about track record. It's about trusted sources. There are still a few trusted media sources out there, I just want to tell you. Think tanks, White House statements, and written in collaboration with ChatGPT 4.0, because I'm not writing this whole deck, but I can tell you that I carefully researched it. So October 7th response, this is really when it all started. This is obviously, we think in terms of before October 7th and after October 7th. And I know I'm not alone in thinking that. So what did we have? We had Biden's historic support. He went to Israel, the only president to go to Israel in an active war on October 18th. Publicly condemned Hamas, gave $12.5 billion in military aid package, did emergency funding, deployed U.S. Navy warships, jet fighters, worked with Israel and Egypt on humanitarian efforts, intelligence shared, and of course said, we will stand with Israel, we will stand with you as long as you need us to. And I think all of us felt so protected. In fact, even in Israel, they did. These were billboards in Tel Aviv. Thank you, Mr. President. I mean, I don't know about you, but I saw these in real time back then, and it warmed my heart. It made me feel like we're really being a true ally. And I felt really proud of that. And I felt really proud of him. But then things started to get a little weird. And I am a former publicist. I am someone who works with the media for many years. I don't do it anymore, but I have a lot of contacts still. And I never really paid that much attention, probably like most of you, to, okay, where's the bias here? So when October 7th happened and this very monumental report on October 17th came out, where the New York Times reported about the bombing in Al-Shifa Hospital, and within 5 minutes said 500 people were dead, the minute I saw that headline in real time, I was like, whoa, how would they possibly know 500 people were dead in real time? And then it started to unravel, right? We started to really realize, oh my God, they are not fact-checking this. Where is journalism? They changed their headlines multiple times. And eventually on the 23rd admitted that it was an error. But by then, you guys, the world was against us. I'm sure if you all think back to that time, it was almost as if someone switched on a button and that was it. We were the enemy. Israel was the enemy. It was really very scary to watch for all of us. So what happened in terms of our administration and Iran? And I think this is really important to understand. In September of 2023, there was a US-Iran prisoner swap. As part of that deal, $6 billion was going to be transferred in Iranian oil revenue. It had been frozen in South Korea, and then it was going to go into accounts in Qatar. The money was intended for humanitarian purposes. I'm going to put that in quotes now. So the Biden administration did freeze that $6 billion, and that was a really good thing. But then what happened in March is the US and Iraq reached an agreement allowing a different $10 billion to unfreeze. So it's like they froze this bunch, but then they let the other one go. And after October 7th, this was a very contentious thing to have happened because we all know that money is not used for humanitarian purposes. So when we think about Iran sanctions, and we think about comparing Trump's first term to Biden-Harris, it's a very clear picture. They have a very different approach. And I think it's really important for everyone to understand what this approach is. From a diplomatic engagement perspective, Biden seeks to re-enter nuclear talks, while Trump favored isolation because he didn't like the deal that Obama put us in. Both administrations have imposed sanctions, but Trump's were more comprehensive and aimed at regime change. From a military perspective, Trump used military strikes while Biden preferred diplomacy, but continued putting pressure through sanctions and strategic alliances. Two very different approaches. And quite frankly, I think there's probably pros and cons on both sides, but I think in a post-October 7th world, and understanding the Middle East only responds to strength. They really only respond to strength. This is the approach. At the end of Trump's first term, the sanctions made them basically not be able to produce oil, crippled their economy. And then when Biden took office, all of the oil production went back up. It's a really relevant point because prior to Biden taking office, Trump had crippled Iran's economy. And we needed them to feel the pain because the Islamic Republic of Iran was doing such bad things that we needed to control them. And unfortunately, when policy changes, you can see what happens on this chart. You can see here that when Trump was president, this red area is what happened to their economy. And then when Biden took over, this blue area is what happened to the economy. These are facts. This is from the World Economic Outlook. It's just important for you to understand that because having Iran, not the people, but the IRGC have the money to create terror organizations and proxies around the world is really what we're seeing the results of right now. And of course, there's UNWRA. I think UNWRA is probably something none of us ever thought of or heard of prior, maybe once. Maybe there was a campaign once. But UNWRA funding was paused after October 7th because it became clear that some of their employees had participated. And then there was an investigation done. And in January, it was revealed that they were involved. The funding was stopped. But back in April, our US government resumed funding UNWRA. We all know now, Sinwar was just found dead amongst bags of UNWRA money and aid. So good intentions of helping the humanitarian situation, but UNWRA is in it just like the IRGC. And we are currently funding that. And then there's this whole other topic of campus anti-Semitism. We're getting hit from all the sides. And the Biden-Harris response is really important to point out. So first of all, we all know October 7th happened. And by October 10th, there were protests. No one even understood why they were protesting. We had thought that the entire world was on our side. And then it became clear that was not the case. So what's the timeline? October 11th, Biden and Doug had a round table with Jewish community leaders. November 14th, they put out the Biden-Harris administration takes action to address alarming rise of reported anti-Semitic and Islamophobic events at schools and college campuses. May 2nd, they addressed protests at college campuses. And May 7th, they put out the fact sheet on the administration ramping up actions to counter anti-Semitism on college campuses. There's one really important thing to point out here. I don't know if you're recognizing this. We went from November to May, where all of us watched in horror the campus anti-Semitism. And there was not one thing said by this administration until May 2nd. Here he is giving his address about campus anti-Semitism. And today, this came out today, and I think it's important to include, thank you, Dan Tarman, for sending it. Anti-Israel U.S. campus groups radicalize with no one to stop them, experts warn. Former security officials say increasingly violent rhetoric mimics that of the 1960s students who pivoted to domestic terror. It's going unhindered as students point to the First Amendment. So I think no matter what, we can all agree the riots, the protests, the violence, the anti-Semitism around our cities on campus, there has been nothing to stop any of that. We have seen nothing. And there's been a visible shift in approach. So what happened? There was a change of tone, a shift towards caution and concerns over civilian casualties. Now, of course, no one wants civilian casualties, but calls for ceasefire and restraining Israeli actions, growing domestic and international pressure, slow walking military aid and weapons, and a lot of mixed messages. I would be on X for one moment and see something really positive and supportive of Israel, and the next thing I would hear would be just taking it back in another direction. And I think if everyone's honest with themselves, you know that this is factual. I mean, there was this shift. And I think that the pressure, immense pressure of the international community, including the far left, had everything to do with this. I think that Biden has been a wonderful ally to Israel over the years, and so has Kamala Harris, but something changed. So yet another angle entering Rafah, the Biden-Harris position. So John Spencer, for those of you who don't follow him, I highly recommend it. He is the chief of urban warfare studies at the Modern War Institute at West Point. He's not Jewish, by the way, so I think that's important to say. He wrote this article for Newsweek back in March. Israel has created a new standard for urban warfare. Why will no one admit it? Right? Why? Why will no one admit it? The ratio of combatant to civilian deaths by the IDF is the lowest in the history of any single war ever. But the numbers are coming out of the Gaza Ministry of Health, which is Hamas, and the media is just sucking it all up and spitting it back out. So what's the Rafah timeline? In March 2024, President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris were very clear. They warned Israel about a full-scale attack in Rafah. They were very concerned about civilian casualties. Well, Netanyahu knew that Sinwar was there, and he knew the hostages were there. So on May 6th, the IDF entered Rafah. By May 20th, within 2 weeks, they evacuated almost 1 million people in 2 weeks without incident. Literally, 1 million people. It's unbelievable what they've been able to do. And then we all know the sad fact that on September 1st, bodies of 6 hostages, including Israeli-American Hirsch Goldberg Pullen, were found in Rafah. And October 17th, the IDF killed Sinwar in Rafah. So it begs the question, had the IDF been able to go in back in March with those hostages? Would Hirsch still be alive? I say yes, because this is where the public pressure and the diplomacy really ties Israel's hands. And it was a devastating day to learn that they were killed. And don't forget, there's 101 hostages still there. Here they are. We're still here. And we cannot give up on them. And one of the things that was really disturbing this week from the Wall Street Journal, Sinwar messaged Hamas officials urging them to refuse a hostage deal. Hamas had the upper hand in negotiations. Sinwar said, citing internal political divisions within Israel, cracks in Netanyahu's wartime coalition, and mounting U.S. pressure to alleviate the suffering in Gaza. So here's where a good intention, right, alleviating the suffering in Gaza, like who wouldn't want to do that? Of course we want to do that. But here's where it is in direct opposition to getting the hostages out, because Sinwar knew they had the upper hand. And this is where, as a former publicist and a marketer, I can tell you, we always like to say, oh, actions speak louder than words. But words influence, and silence also influences. And we've seen a mix of both in terms of empowering Hamas and berating Israel to not let them do what they need to do. And then, of course, we have intelligence leaks. And by the way, just so you know, I'm going to do the flip side on the Trump side after I get through all of Biden and Harris. Intelligence leaks are very disturbing. There's a long history of these, starting in the Obama administration and certainly before that, but specifically with Israeli-Iran stuff, there has been incidences prior to this. This is an ongoing investigation right now, but the Pentagon leak is Israel's plans on what they plan to do in retaliation to Iran, including the types of weapons they plan on using. And that's a really scary thing. So now we'll go to the intelligence leak in Trump's first term, because he is not a golden child either. There are mistakes that happen. This was back in May 10th, 2017, where Trump was having a meeting in the Oval Office with some Russian intelligence or Russian executives, and he provided to them some top secret information about ISIS plans to basically blow up airlines. And of course, Trump said that he was in the right to tell them, and it's their fight against ISIS and terrorism. Israel disagreed, but what followed this is Trump actually going to Israel, making nice with the leaders there, and then actually 1 year later moving the embassy to Jerusalem at Israel's 70th birthday. So I think there is always going to be some of this stuff, but at the same time, we need to understand who's in the White House and who people are working with. Moving on to little Satan, big Satan. I'm sure many of you have heard this phrase before. If you have no idea who they are, let me tell you, spoiler alert, little Satan is Israel, big Satan is America. That is why, for me, spoiler alert right now, dealing with the IRGC, the Islamic Republic, is to me the single most important issue of who we elect as our next president. And I know that sounds crazy because we live in America, but when you actually, and I'm going to show a little picture in a minute, when you actually dig into what they want to do and what they are already doing, those protests, those riots you see around our country, they are not accidental. They are coming from this group. They have big plans for us. This is a video that Canary Mission put together. I did post it on my Instagram, but I'm putting the link here. By the way, I'm going to share this deck out after with the video. This is Bringing the War Home. It's an 8-minute video that will change your life forever. You will be so disturbed about what is already happening in this country that you have no idea about. So what do they want to do? Well, first of all, nuclear ambitions. That's their number one priority. Terrorism and destabilization, proxy warfare. We see it in Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, etc. Spreading jihad, holy war, cyber and asymmetric warfare, and establishing Sharia law globally. This is real. This is their plan. And you know what's funny, everyone? We should start believing people when they speak. Just an idea. So who's on our team right now? Starting with Obama, moving over to Biden-Harris, and then going to Harris-Walz. Let's connect the dots. So Phil Gordon is the National Security Advisor. He was under Obama, he's under Biden, and he will be moving over if Kamala Harris wins the presidency as National Security Advisor. He is also simultaneously being investigated for ties to Tehran. There has been a notice sent to Vice President Kamala Harris addressing all of these accusations that has not been responded to at this point. I think it's important for everyone to understand this is happening behind the scenes as this person holds the very important position of National Security Advisor. Then we have Meher Batara. You may have seen some of my Instagram videos on this gentleman. So first of all, he was involved in SJP his entire life. He was also an intern at UNWRA. He has actually called for Israel's destruction. And in his yearbook picture at Georgetown in 2006, he posed in a keffiyeh under a divest from apartheid sign. He is the Senior Director, National Security Council currently, and will also be under Kamala Harris and worked for Biden as well. There's his yearbook picture. Doesn't he look so cute? He's in the middle. Look at him right there. So happy. Divest from Israeli apartheid. Then we have Ariane Tabatabai, who is in the news today, actually. This is a developing story. She is a Pentagon aide. She is right now the top suspect in the recent leak from the Pentagon. No one is saying definitively right now, but right now, this is who is currently in our administration, will probably be in Kamala's, and is someone who is very close with Phil Gordon, and they have even written op-eds together right there. This says, "The choice that's coming, in Iran with the bomb or bombing Iran," by Philip Gordon and Ariane Tabatabai. So again, important to know who is in this inner circle of the current administration and the future one if Kamala Harris wins. Then we have Keith Ellison, Minnesota AG with ties to CARE, ties to Louis Farrakhan, somebody who every single Jew should be extremely concerned about. If Kamala Harris wins, this is who she is appointing. And by the way, I welcome all of you when you get this deck to go do your deep dive research too. You will find the same thing. Elon Goldenberg was just appointed a couple months ago as Kamala Harris's campaign director for Jewish Liaison Community Director, and he has a very anti-Israel history as well. And then, of course, Robert Malley, who is basically now suspended. No one really knows why, but he was Biden's Iran envoy, got pulled his security clearance, some shady stuff happening here. No one really knows, but not a good story. Moving on to Trump. So Trump's support for Israel. So what happened in Trump's first term? I think this very much answers a lot of questions regarding Trump is not a friend to Israel, Trump is an anti-Semite, Trump is Hitler, all the things. So first of all, a very important show of faith in Israel, the embassy moved to Jerusalem. The Abraham Accords, which is creating normalcy with Saudi Arabia and some other Arab countries. Recognition of the Golan Heights, which is essential for security. Withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal because he did not think it was good and wanted to pressure them to bring them back to the negotiating table to get a better deal. Recognition of Jewish settlements, the Taylor Force Act, pay for slay, which we'll get into, and the executive order on anti-Semitism. So fun fact, Title VI, that maybe you've heard a lot about this year, didn't include Jews, didn't include us before Trump made this executive order. Huge policy change. And of course, a strong stance against anti-Semitism. So what was Iran's policy? He withdrew from that nuclear deal in May 2018. That was an agreement brokered by Obama. And when he came into office, he was like, this is not good for us. We need to take down basically the IRGC. So he pulled out of the deal to see if he can get them back to the negotiating table. April 8th, 2019, the Trump administration declared the Islamic Republic as a terrorist organization. Can you believe that they were not a terrorist organization prior? I find that pretty amazing. And of course, defunding Iran started May 18th, cutting off all funds to the regime that they used to support destructive activities around the world. And then a really big escalation of military in taking out Soleimani in January 2020. The puppet master is dead. Iranian General Qasem Soleimani's power and why his death is such a big deal. This was a very aggressive move by the Trump administration, and things did heat up after that. But I think that we now see what they're capable of, and the whole world does not want the IRGC to exist. Oil sanctions, oil exports plunge. Again, the economy went down, and now we're moving on to October 7th response from Trump. So first of all, a very big differential between his rhetoric and Biden-Harris is he openly from the beginning supported Israel's victory, not Israel's right to defend itself. Those are two different things. Every single sovereign country has a right to defend itself. He was supporting the victory. Of course, condemnation of anti-Semitism across all political lines. Should not be political fighting anti-Semitism. And of course, reminding people of his support of Israel, of course, because you know Trump and his ego, he's got to tell everyone what he's done, and that's his personal brand. And a strong stance on radicalism, obviously vowing to remove the Jew haters, obviously the ones who are here on visa, but also increasing police presence on our campuses and making sure that Jewish people are safe. And here's what he's promising in the second term. He's promising support for Israel's victory, stop Iran's nuclear ambitions, deporting extremists, protecting the border, defense and security, targeting anti-Semitic protests, strengthening the US-Israel relationship, obviously the Abraham Accords extension and making it into a real thing, defunding universities who do not comply, stronger law enforcement support, banning refugee resettlement from conflict zones, and restoring and expanding travel bans. We all know that a lot of bad people have come into this country. The IRGC and a lot of other places are making sure of that because, again, going back to little Satan, big Satan, there's a big plan here. There's a big plan, and I urge you, if you do nothing else, if you don't remember any single thing I say, which I'll be totally offended, but if you don't, watch the Canary Mission video. Watch it. It's 8 minutes of your life, and it will change your worldview forever. Okay, Biden-Harris administration support for Israel. So they did a lot of great things. They did the National Strategy to Counter Anti-Semitism, which they launched in May. They improved security for Jewish institutions. Nearly $400 million in grants have been awarded to Jewish institutions during Biden's term, combating online hate, urging technology platforms to take stronger actions to combat anti-Semitic content. and supporting US-Israel relations. However, we know that nothing changed on campuses despite this strategy, and the US-Israel relations have been strained. So Taylor Force is the pay for slay. So Taylor Force Act is what Trump put into law, which some of you may not know this. And if you don't know this, your mind is going to be blown. So the Palestinian Authority pays people to commit terrorist acts. The more people they kill, the more money they make. This is a fact. Google it after this, Taylor Force Act. Taylor Force is named after a soldier, a US soldier who was killed by a Palestinian in Tel Aviv many years ago. So the Taylor Force Act is meant to make sure that US money does not get inadvertently used by the Palestinian Authority to pay for terrorism, because then we're paying for terrorism. Hello. So what happened? So Trump enacts the Taylor Force Act, but then essentially when Biden and Harris came into office, they resumed the aid. So they resumed financial aid to the Palestinian people, which had been halted by the Trump administration. And the administration provided $360 million in humanitarian aid, and of course, emphasizing the funds are for humanitarian needs. But we all know it's impossible. And basically, the Biden and Harris administration was sued for not adhering to the Taylor Force Act. And this is still an ongoing thing. Well, no, I guess it's over once we have a shift in policy in president. What is Harris-Walz's second-term promise and support for Israel? Well, they back Israel's right to defend itself. They want to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. They want Jewish security and peace efforts. They want expansion of the national strategy to counter anti-Semitism, law enforcement and campus safety. They want a ceasefire and the return of the hostages, and they want to hold tech platforms accountable. So again, these are promises, and we will have to see what happens, whoever gets elected, how they actually solve this incredible problem that we're dealing with. So Middle East views on Iran. Doesn't everyone want to know right this minute, what are all these Arab countries thinking? Well, the Arab nations along the Persian Gulf have urged Israel to deliver a decisive blow to Iran. So the Arab nations want the destruction of the IRGC. They all basically would love to be part of this Abraham Accords, do business with Israel, have good relations with Israel, because, by the way, it's good for them to be on good terms with Israel. So when we think about right now, the defunding of Iran and the sanctions on the Trump side, and the funding of Iran and the diplomacy on the Biden-Harris side, and the let's work it out versus let's wipe the IRGC off the map approach, the Arab nations want Israel to wipe them off the map. What does Israel want in the US election? This recently just came out. So this is an ABC News report. Israelis broadly favor Trump over Harris on security in this poll. So as far as who is better for Israel's security, Trump at 58%, Harris at 20%. Preference for US president, 24% versus 54%. Now, this is very much voting along party lines in Israel too. So you have to assume people who like Netanyahu probably like Trump, right? So what are the people who hate Netanyahu think? Supporters of Israeli opposition parties, by contrast, split closely, 39 to 37%, Harris to Trump, in preference for the presidency. That said, even opposition party supporters picked Trump over Harris as better for Israel's security, albeit by a comparatively close 41% to 32%. I just thought it was really interesting to see, what does Israel think? So now we are going to go into your questions, some other specific questions that you have that are not related to Iran, October 7th, all those things, because, you know, there were 1,300 of them. So we've got some other ones. So here's one. How can we trust Trump? Right? I mean, he's a wild card. So how I think about is, and Shabbos will give you his own point of view when he comes here. I think about this as, this is why I wanted this deck to be about policy. I think if you listen to the rhetoric and the drama and the mean tweets and all the things, and you listen to the mainstream media, you're going to get this view of there's no way I can trust him. So I'm going to be honest with you. All throughout Trump's presidency, his first term, every time he said fake news, I was literally like, oh, come on, just get over it. You know what? You're a sore loser. It's your ego. There's no fake news. I really believed that. I was like, whatever, he's drama. Until October 7th. And when I started seeing what our media is doing to Israel in this horrible, horrendous fight after the worst massacre in our history since the Holocaust, I was like, wow, I am so wrong. So for me personally, and everyone can prioritize their own selves, I focus on policy. I focus on policy and I focus on what they say also in terms of what they plan to do. And especially when they speak to media in terms of their direct quotes. Because I think a lot of the frustration a lot of us have right now is that there's always this both sides-ism. There's always this, well, let me think, who's in the audience right now? Let me change the way I speak. Trump has one setting, you guys, one setting. It's not the most amazing setting. He can do really well by being media trained. He could do really well to have some discipline, but he says exactly what he's thinking. You know what you're going to get. It is authentic. I've never actually seen someone who just spits out exactly what he's thinking. So what he has said he would do during his first term, he did for the Jewish people and for Israel. And I think that's really important. And right now, we can't afford to have these mixed messages depending on if you're in Michigan or you're speaking in different places. Trump is worse than Hitler. Hear it all the time. He's a dictator, he's a fascist, he's Hitler. So here is a great little article, which you can read later, on 100 times President Trump supported Israel. I will also tell you that his former ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, is someone that my family knew very well growing up. And he's probably one of the most brilliant minds on the Middle East conflict ever. And he is someone who Trump trusts implicitly. And I think that's why we saw the results we did during Trump's first term. Trump is a dictator. Well, let's go through this. So if you think about his first term, he had limited presidential power. He did not eliminate other opposing parties. He did not stop freedom of press or speech. There was an independent judiciary arm, and there was regular congressional oversight. Because fun fact, you guys, we live in America. No president that's elected can become a dictator. We have all the rules in place. So this is not something that anyone needs to worry about. Trump wrote Project 2025. So this is something that we hear time and again. If you go on Kamala Harris's site, it's front and center. But Project 2025 was written by 100 conservative groups, 100 conservative groups. So to put it in terms, it would be like if we took Jewish National Fund, UJA, and Hillel, and God knows who else, and we said, hey guys, come together and write a manuscript for how we can live our best Jewish lives. This is how 100 conservative organizations feel their lives would be better if this was implemented. It is a resource. It was curated and put together by the Heritage Foundation. That is an organization that, yes, Trump knows that he's listened to the things that they have recommended, but it doesn't mean he implements them. There's good things in here and there's bad things in here. There's things that you would agree with and there's things that you won't agree with. It is a manuscript. It is a guide. And he did not write it. I think it's really easy to just tack him onto it. It is by 100 conservative groups. And this is just the truth. So abortion, I mean, by the way, going back to my book On Brand, the fact that I'm even talking about this makes me want to actually die, but I'm going to talk about it because I want you to know, we watched the debate, right? We watched the debate And everyone was freaking out on the internet that Trump said that basically in some states you can just abort a baby at 9 months. You guys, you can. In certain states, Colorado, New Jersey, New Mexico, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington, D.C., abortions can be legally performed with no explicit gestational limits. The only thing that has to happen, there are medical guidelines, there are ethical considerations to restrict these procedures to extreme cases. So when Trump said that you can do that and the entire internet blew up, the internet is wrong. Google this. Furthermore, Tim Walz just signed in January 2023, even though he said the opposite during the debate, the Protect Reproductive Options Act, or PRO Act, which guarantees a fundamental right to reproductive health care, including abortion, without specific gestational limits. Again, that means in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th month, you can get an abortion in Minnesota. So again, I'm not saying one side is good, one side is bad. I am just telling you these are facts, and you should know. Trump will ban abortion and IVF. So I saw Glennon Doyle post this the other day, and I was like, oh my God, this is just so insane. He has literally said time and again, he has no interest in a nationwide abortion ban. Zero. He wants it to be with the states. Now, we can talk about the pros and cons of it being with the states, but there is no nationwide abortion ban. There are exceptions that he is for rape, incest, and life of the mother when that's at risk. He is pro-IVF. That is not going away. He supports all of this at state level decisions. He did not pass a federal abortion ban during his first term. And over time, he's actually had a more moderate approach to this. And yes, in certain states, if you do not have the means to get an abortion, that can be problematic for you. But at the same time, the mentality and the logic is, well, those people who live in that state, if it's so important to them, let them vote for people who will make sure that it is accessible. So when you think about the democratic process, that makes sense. If everyone wants abortion, then vote for people who believe in abortion at the state level. I am going to take some questions. I hope you found that informative. Let's see. Okay. Somebody asks, why is Biden-Harris so committed to empowering Iran? So it's a really interesting question. I don't know that I would say they're committed to empowering Iran, but I would say that they definitely have an approach and a strategy that I don't think any of us really understand. But when we go back to the part in the deck and really think about the people who are in the current administration, Phil Gordon, who's being investigated for ties to Iran, Ariane Tabatai, who's being now allegations that she's the leak to Iran, Meher Batar, who also SJP, UNWRA intern. You have to ask yourself, are these the people who are making the policy empowering Iran? Yeah, it's their job. And it started with Obama. All of this started with Obama. And when you really connect the dots, the Obama policies have carried on to the Biden-Harris policies. And based on the names that Kamala Harris has released so far as Phil Gordon and Meher Batar as coming into her administration, you have to assume whatever their strategy is just going to continue. But what we have seen is that money just funds October 7th. So for me, that's a non-starter. Okay. Why would Kamala have anti-Semitic people in her administration if her husband is Jewish? I love this question. So, I think, as we know, there's a lot of different flavors of Jewish. Jewish Voice for Peace. There's Jews in there that I don't think any of us would agree with. There's different levels of Judaism, and that's not to say that one Jew is better than another, but a Jew who is anti-Israel, probably not a great Jew. And Doug is somebody who was born Jewish, but he raised a daughter who, for the past year, has been fundraising for UNWRA. So I'd say growing up in that household was not really a Jewish family in the way that like some of us know Jewish families. So I think we have to stop saying, oh, but his wife is Jewish or her husband's Jewish. Like, it doesn't really matter. What matters is in sort of your actions and your offspring. And I mean, Ella Emhoff could not be more anti-Israel if she tried. I mean, she's raising money for UNWRA, even though UNWRA was already proven to have employees who participated in October 7th. So I think that, again, you know, the Jewish thing, there's different levels of it. And by the way, I do not think Kamala Harris is an anti-Semite in any way, shape, or form. I absolutely do not. But I think that, I'm going to quote my grandma Hilda, Holocaust survivor, and she said, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. So I'll change it. Show me who you hire and I'll tell you who you are. Why is the federal government still funding universities failing to abide by Title VI? I think this is what Virginia Fox and Elise Stefanik have been trying to do, is basically get them defunded. Trump has promised he will defund those universities if he becomes president. Kamala Harris has not said that. How could Harris-Biden better manage the anti-Semitism on college campuses? So I think that this was one of those things where the cat's away, the mice play. And because of the weak language, because there were no repercussions, because these kids got arrested and then, you know, revolving door got arrested and then went back right onto campus scot-free, why would they stop? So the only way to stop them would have been to do what happened in some other states. Bring in the National Guard, bring in the police. In Europe, you saw their National Guard take care of those college campuses. They were so aggressive, it was done. We didn't do that, and we needed to do that. And that's why when I pointed out in the beginning, November 14th was a statement about the college campuses, not by Biden though, by his people. And then the first time we heard from the president address the nation about anti-Semitism was May 2nd. Are you kidding me? May 2nd, while all of us here were dying, my son is on a college campus. I literally would call him incessantly being like, are you dead yet? Are you okay? Have you been taken over by an encampment? I mean, it's unacceptable that they let it go on. It's unacceptable. And here's why I believe that they will continue to, or she will, and Walz will, because they are too obsessed with how the far left think and feel. And it's time to not care. It's time to make every single person on this soil of this country feel safe. And you know what? If it was any other group, we all know it would have been squashed in a day. But because it's the Jews, they just let it go. What is your take on JD Vance and the Jewish people? I mean, JD Vance has been to Israel praying at the wall. He's very pro-Israel. I really didn't have an impression of him that was very solid until I heard him debate. And then I really was like, wow, this guy is really smart. I think that he is a good counterpoint to Trump. I think Trump, as we all know how Trump speaks, I think JD Vance adds a level of decorum and professionalism to it, which is kind of nice. I think when we all watched the VP debate, we were like, wow, this is kind of relaxing. I don't know. It just felt like you could actually just listen to what they're saying. Moving on here. What do you suggest we do about BDS, SJP, regardless of the election? It's a great question. So SJP is currently running in over 200 college campuses. And the elephant in the room, and nobody likes to hear this, but it is true. SJP, along with Jewish Voice for Peace, along with a lot of these other organizations, are funded not only by the IRGC, but also by the Soros family, the Rockefeller family, and many other organizations who are also huge supporters of Kamala Harris. So if you ask yourself, follow the money, how do I follow the money? Why was nothing done about the campus protests? Well, because Biden Harris's one of their biggest donors helped fund it. And they don't do it directly. They do it through an organization that then pays for it. But if you go onto NGO Monitor and you actually start looking into the checks that are cut and where they go, it's all there. And, you know, people used to say, oh, it's anti-Semitic, don't accuse George Soros. No, we can follow the money, okay? We can follow the money. So that is why nothing happens on college campuses. That's why. And Alex Soros is more radical than his father. Alex Soros is very much involved in this current campaign. Nice picture posing with Tim Walz at the DNC. And you have to remember that the money controls the decisions. Why do the Dems care so much about the fringe progressives since their voting bloc is so small? Well, I think that their voting bloc is small, but you have to remember, think about the squad. They're noisy, right? Squeaky wheel gets the oil. So the squad has been, you know, just a thorn in all of our sides for years, right? And they're making a lot of noise. And I think what we're seeing is this group of people have no problem being violent, have no problem destroying property, have no problem creating chaos. And you have to say to yourself, well, why? It's actually in their strategy. If you read through their strategy, they are telling their supporters, here's how you create chaos. Here's how you avoid being arrested. It is all a plan. So they're problematic because they cause a lot of trouble. All of these people have been planning together. I mean, when you think about how quickly the protests broke out right after October 7th, this has been planned for years. And when you think about the mobilization of SJP, they're already on the college campuses. It was brilliant. Okay, why didn't Biden or Harris show proper respect to Hirsch's parents? For example, attend a Shiva ceremony. Well, while I don't know, because I'm obviously not involved, I can say that they were responsible for stopping Israel from entering Rafah back in March. And I think there's probably an element of guilt there. And unfortunately, that resulted in the murder of Hirsch Goldberg Poland and 5 other hostages. And I think they know, Biden said don't. And Kamala said she studied the maps. So I think that's probably something they have to live with for the rest of their lives. And I'm sure that they are upset about it. I would be. I think that they would probably feel very responsible for making those decisions. Because I believe that if the IDF went in March, Hirsch would be alive today. They would be alive today. That's the thing about the IDF, and I think a lot of you know this. They're so fucking good. Let them just do what they do. Let them go in fast and get out. And that is what the Biden-Harris administration didn't let them do. So as many good things as they did as far as money at different points, and there's different waves, ebbs of flow of support, they restricted them. They slow walk things. They held them back. And that is now why Netanyahu stopped listening to Biden. Okay. What do you have to say about JD affiliating with white nationalists and Tucker Carlson? This is a great question. So there's a couple things that I have to say about that. What I've seen historically is that a lot of these people, Trump included, in different rooms, different cocktail parties, they will talk to everyone and be nice to everyone. And I don't think that they think it's a big deal, like as much as we do. I believe that it would be great for Trump and JD Vance to disassociate from a Tucker Carlson type of person. But there are obviously people in the Republican Party who are fans of Tucker Carlson. So this is where I stop paying attention to the cocktail party rhetoric and I focus on the policy. So when I pointed out Kamala's team, Biden's team, I wasn't talking about, oh, she went to a cocktail party and she rubbed elbows with so-and-so who's, an Islamist. I'm talking about the people who are in security and defense and are making policy. So if a white nationalist was brought on to be in the Trump administration, I'd have a lot to say about that. But having a cocktail or being in a room They're going to mingle like that. Both sides have mingled with people that we don't agree with. But who's making the policy? That's why I really wanted, and I hope you guys feel this way, and please give me feedback if you don't. I wanted to make this about policy and fact because the story tells itself. It just does. How can we better fight disinformation on social media? Oh, you guys. The algorithms are against us. They just are. They just are. And it's really, I think this whole war got so out of control because of social media. It's a huge problem. I don't have an answer. I wish I did. I wish I did. Biden-Harris refused to attend pro-Israel events like the Israeli-American Council Summit because of Michigan. So you have to remember a lot of their decisions were based on the election, and that sucks, but it's true. And at the end of the day, I think that there's something really powerful about standing up and saying, this is how I feel, this is how I believe. By the way, put it in the reverse. Trump's vocal support of Israel and fighting anti-Semitism and standing on the stage at the IAC in front of the Israeli flag, I'm sure pissed off all those white nationalists. He had no problem saying how he feels and believes and pissing off all those people. By the way, I heard they're not voting for him. That was announced, I think, today. The white nationalists are not voting for him. I don't know who they're voting for, but there's integrity to this. It's not about rhetoric in terms of just shooting the shit, tweeting. It's about policy and having integrity. So if you're going to stand up in front of the IAC, in front of an Israeli flag, you guys, if you follow me, you know I posted this. I said, it's a really simple litmus test for you. On the day that Trump posed in front of the Israeli flag, would Kamala Harris, right this minute, stand in front of an Israeli flag? Simple question. The answer is no. So you have to ask yourself, why? Okay. Do you believe that this election is binary obvious for those Jews who support Israel? So after October 7th, I decided early on my number one issue was who is going to be able to protect Israel and handle Iran? That's my litmus test. That's why I'm voting for Trump. That is the single most important thing. When you watch that Canary mission video and you say to yourself, who's going to handle this? Who's going to handle what's happening in this video? We need serious management. And because Iran, the RGC is not playing around at all. We have the biggest problems we've ever had in our entire lives. We now realize after October 7th, we are not safe. Who is going to save us? Not just us, save America from what the IRGC is planning and their proxies and Russia and China. Oh, no one asked this question, but I'm going to get into it. People who say, oh my God, Trump loves Putin, he loves Kim Jong-un, all the things, they're best friends, right? He loves dictators, he's a dictator. I have to remind everyone, Trump is not a politician. Trump made billions by negotiating. He wrote the deal. His entire life, he has proven to himself that he can negotiate anything and get a successful outcome. So what do you think he's applying in conversations to Putin and Kim Jong-un? He's applying the same principles, right? When you think back, now I'm getting into my books, but when you think back to, if you have a really serious problem and you don't know what to do, the trick is to think back to a time you were successful in the past and what did you do to be successful? So you're dealing with two of the toughest leaders in the world. Trump's going to think back, well, how was I successful with all these tough negotiations my whole life? You show them respect. You show them that they're an equal. You show them that you're human, you have a good personality, and you're willing to have a conversation. We didn't see any wars when Trump was president. So you're going to go tell me that strategy doesn't work? People love to say, oh my God, he loves Putin. No, he respects Putin as a fierce leader, and Putin is a fierce leader. And because of that mutual respect, they're willing to tango. They're willing to have a conversation. That's not the same thing with the current administration. Why do you think Trump is capable of rescuing our hostages? Why don't American politicians speak more about the American Jewish hostages? Yeah, I think Trump is capable of doing that because Trump is going to let Israel do what Israel knows they need to do. Trump is not solving it. Trump knows enough to let Israel solve it. And I think that's a real differentiating point. Why don't American politicians speak more about the American Jewish hostages? Because they're Israeli. It's a sad fact. I mean, when you think about the hostages in the past, were on the cover of every single newspaper every single day for weeks. And this is just doesn't even matter. It's a sad state of media, and it's a sad state of our country. How do you know Kamala won't stand up in front of an Israeli flag? Well, because the Israeli American Council invited her and him to speak at that event, and they declined. And when Netanyahu came to Congress, which was a very big deal, she declined to go. So those are two major actions that tell me right at this time, this year, she would not be willing to stand in front of an Israeli flag because she might risk votes in Michigan. Now, prior to October 7th, I think she absolutely would have. But I think that there's such a divide in the Democratic Party, such a divide, and the Democratic Party has been infiltrated with so many people that hate Israel that it doesn't behoove her to do that, because then she's putting herself in a situation where she might piss off members of her party that do not have our best interests at heart. Okay, so we've got two sides here. What are we going to do if Trump wins, and what are we going to do if Kamala wins? What we're going to do is everything we're doing right now. I think that's we're going to keep on speaking up for our rights, and we're going to make sure we hold our leaders accountable. We have to hold our leaders accountable no matter who it is. I don't think I have more questions. Oh, do you actually think Kamala Harris thinks there is a genocide in Gaza? Yeah, I do. I do. Because that video clip, her guard was down, and it was almost like a hot mic situation where she didn't even know she was being filmed. And I think that when you hear moments like that, it should really make you think. Do you think if Trump wins, Kamala will contest the results? I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I guess we'll all find out together, won't we? All right, so next steps, here's what's going to happen. I am going to send an email back out through the system that you signed up in with, when probably not tonight, well, maybe tonight, I could probably send the deck tonight. I want to package the video as well and put it so other people can watch it. So give me a minute to do that. But in the meanwhile, you have homework. You're going to watch that Canary mission video. And as always, I love feedback. My email is askaliza@alizalicht.com. And I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for coming. Have a good night, everyone.